They told me not to travel the mountain paths at night. The locals in the Philippines warned me with hushed voices, their eyes darting nervously toward the dark forests. "Don't stray from the trail," they said, "and whatever you do, don't look it in the eyes." At first, I thought it was just superstition stories meant to frighten outsiders like me. But the way they spoke, it wasn't just folklore, it was fear. They called it the Tikbalang. A towering figure, half human and half horse, with long limbs that bend unnaturally. It waits where the mist is thickest, tricking travelers into wandering in circles, lost until exhaustion or madness takes them. I laughed it off until the night I decided to see for myself. The trail was silent, except for the crunch of gravel beneath my boots. But the deeper I went, the heavier the air became, as though the mountain itself was holding its breath. And then I heard it. Hooves, not galloping, but slow, deliberate steps echoing in the darkness always just behind me, though no light revealed anything there. I quickened my pace, the sound followed. The path twisted, and suddenly nothing looked familiar. The same tree appeared again and again, its gnarled roots twisting across the trail. No matter which way I turned, I ended up back where I had started. The locals had warned me, when the Tikbalang sets its eyes on you, it can bend the forest, trap you in its endless maze. And as the fog grew thicker, I realized I was no longer walking alone. The air around me grew thick, almost tangible, as though invisible hands were pressing against my chest. Each breath became a struggle, shallow and uneasy, while the fog swirled in shapes that seemed too deliberate to be natural. The sound of hooves came again, closer this time. Not the steady rhythm of a horse, but an erratic beat, like something limping or stalking. I turned sharply, flashlight in hand, sweeping its beam through the mist. The light cut across the trees, their trunks tall and skeletal, but the beam never touched what I was looking for. Still, I felt it watching me. That unshakable sense of eyes boring into my back, waiting for me to make a mistake. The locals had told me a trick: turn your shirt inside out and the Tikbalang will lose interest. It sounded ridiculous when I first heard it. But now, standing in the choking fog, I found my hands trembling as I reached for the hem of my jacket. That's when I heard the voice. It wasn't quite human, but not entirely beast either. A low, distorted chuckle that seemed to echo from everywhere at once. "Where are you going?" My blood froze. The words were garbled, broken, as though coming from a throat not built for human speech. I spun around. That's when the beam of my flashlight finally caught something, two legs, impossibly long and bent backward at the knees, like those of an animal. The skin looked stretched and sinewy, and above them loomed a shadow that didn't quite match the trees. The figure stood still, watching, waiting. I stumbled back, my breath ragged, every instinct screaming to run. But I remembered the warning: if you run, you'll never stop running. The Tikbalang will chase you until your legs give out. So I forced myself to stand still, though my body trembled. The creature shifted, slowly, deliberately, its long limbs emerged from the fog. A towering form, nearly twice the height of a man, with the elongated head of a horse and glowing eyes that cut through the mist like burning embers. It grinned, not like an animal, but like something pretending to be human. And then, without moving its lips, the words slithered into my mind. "You're far from home." The thing about fear in the mountains is that it teaches you new ways to notice. Before that night I had been blind to small betrayals, the way a footfall sounds different when it belongs to something that doesn't breathe like you do, the way shadows stack on top of each other until they form a shape you can't unsee. I learned those differences in the moments after the creature spoke in my head and the fog pressed in until it felt like an ocean. I forced myself to breathe slowly, to keep my heart from announcing my terror to whatever had chosen to watch me. The Tikbalang's voice had been in my skull, soft as velvet and hard as stone. It tasted of iron and old leaves. It said nothing direct after that first phrase, only watched, a tilt of a horse's head like a judge considering a sentence. I remembered a village superstition: if a Tikbalang wants to lead you astray, it will first fix you with a gaze until your feet forget the map you know. I clutched the compass in my pocket like a rosary and pulled my jacket inside out, ridiculous as the action felt. The old woman who taught me that trick had warned, do not do it proud. Do it like you think no one sees. I turned the jacket, my hands shaking. For a heartbeat I imagined the creature laughing. Then the path shifted. For a few pale minutes I thought I had simply misread a bend. The same boulder appeared to my left, then to my right, then ahead. Trees returned that should not have been there. The mountain folded inward like a pocket and spat me out again and again at the same fork. My compass spun with a lazy, disbelieving wobble. Every attempt to correct my course sent me back to the little shrine where a child's ribbon hung on a branch. A ribbon. I had not noticed it the first pass. Now it seemed freshly tied, flapping as if some unseen hand had just made the knot. The hairs along my arms rose, footsteps in the grasses moved in time with the ragged breath I tried to hide. The Tikbalang was playing with me, weaving the trail into a thread-drawn mirror of itself. I dropped my pack and listened. The forest gave me a tiny gift, a creak and then, faint, the sound of hooves, the echo of my own earlier fear. The creature was no longer merely behind me. It was building a ring of sound, a wall of rhythm that boxed me in. I looked for traps, for snares, for anything human that might explain this cruelty. There were none, no pick, no wire, no hidden pit. It was only the mountain, the trees, the fog, and that long, improbable gate. I tried the old names the villagers muttered, calling on saints and ancestors in a jumble of Tagalog, Spanish, and the little prayers sewed into my memory. Words did nothing. They hung in the damp air like stale leaves. The creature answered with another thought, clearer and colder: follow. Against every rational impulse, I followed. We moved deeper until the pines thinned into a stunted stand, the kind of trees that look like the bones of bigger forests. The ground was littered with hoof prints, dozens of them overlapping and endless. Occasionally the prints bent the wrong way, a hoof turned inward, as though two different anatomies had trotted the same path. By then the compass needle twitched and refused its duty. Maps were useless. The mountain had become a map with teeth. At the center of that labyrinth a sound rose I had never heard in any language. It was the stuttering of hooves on packed dirt multiplied by a dozen other hooves marching inside tree trunks and inside my skull. When I stepped into the small clearing I found evidence of many other wanderers, scraps of cloth caught on low branches, a carved wooden charm broken in two, a child's carved whistle split lengthwise. Some tokens were fresh, some so old their wood had softened like wet paper. A shrine, but crooked and crookedly worshipped, a place not of protection but of warning. The Tikbalang waited at the far edge, hips cocked, iron-limbed, and impossibly tall. It had a rope of vine wrapped uselessly around one wrist, a crude remnant that suggested others had tried to bind it and failed. Its eyes were not, as the villagers claimed, merely bright. They were patient enough to outlast a lifetime. For the first time I noticed how human its hands were, long fingers with calloused pads, yet its feet ended in hooves like boiled metal. When it moved toward me it didn't run. It walked with the certainty of someone pacing a study, knowing the books by heart. Its mouth flexed into something like a smile. The scent of the forest changed, not foul now but stale, like rooms closed for years. Then, in a voice that was less an invasion of thought and more a memory sliding across my spine, the Tikbalang said, slow and strange, you have the look of someone who studies traps. You make maps, you name things that break the world. I wanted to tell it who I was, researcher, outsider, fool, but the words felt small beside the mountain's breath. Instead I steadied myself and asked, voice barely a lungful, why do you take the lost? For a heartbeat it cocked its head. If it could have shrugged, it might have. For the record, it answered, for the habit. Then, with a tilt that felt like the closing of a book, it added, and for the promise that a bit of human fear gives meaning to the night. The chill that followed that statement wasn't cold in the usual sense. It was the knowledge that my terror fed something older than hunger, a pattern, an appetite for the stories people carry. The Tikbalang did not only hunt bodies, it curated dread. It kept the mountain tidy by taking those who would turn its silence into song. Panic rose, but not blind panic. I had one slender advantage, something the villagers hadn't mentioned until I forced it from their lips with late-night drinks. Some Tikbalang are vain. They like to be noticed, to be feared, to be given a role. That was why inside-out jackets and tossed charms sometimes worked. They interrupted the performance. I dug into my pack and found the small mirror I carried for field work, an inert square of polished glass with a spiderweb of hairline cracks. If the creature wanted an audience, I would give it one. I planted the mirror on a stump and angled it so moonlight caught like a lure, then I stepped back. For a time nothing happened. The Tikbalang watched the glint with an indolent patience. Then, slowly, it approached the mirror. For the first time since the night began, its posture changed. It seemed curious. We all have faces we keep. It peered into that glass, and the reflection showed a thing half man, half horse, and something older, a patchwork of scars and seasons. In its eyes the creature saw itself reflected, and for a moment it forgot me. Moments are small rebellions. I took mine. I stepped forward and seized the rope of vine around its wrist, the same vine the villagers had shown as useless years ago. The vine was gritty, damp, but it held my grip. My palms shook so hard the vine cut into them. The Tikbalang did not roar. It tilted its head and regarded my hands with what could only be called attention. You're bold, it said, or foolish. Sometimes the two are the same. Then so quickly I barely felt the movement it reached out. Its fingers curled around my wrist with an astonishing gentleness, like the clasp of someone remembering how to cradle an instrument. There was a choice suspended between us then, as if the mountain itself had winked. I could run blind, vanish into the maze, and perhaps be claimed by something that enjoyed making names for disappearance. Or I could stay and see what a creature that fed on stories truly had to offer. I stayed. It inhaled a long breath, and the world shifted, the fog thinned. The hoof prints stopped glittering like small moons. For a second the Tikbalang's voice was almost a human sigh. You will speak for the trail, then. But remember, stories make you keep stepping into the dark. Tell it well, and the mountain will leave you bones. Tell it poorly, and it will let you return to the light. Then it loosened its hand and stepped back, melting into the trees as if some stage curtain had closed. The mirror fell and shattered, and the clearing breathed out like someone completing a long phrase. I left the shrine with a hollow in my chest and words forming like coals. I had survived, but the survival felt less like escape than like agreement. Whatever bargain the Tikbalang asked of me was not a promise it would keep. It was a pact that bound me to the mountain's mood. I was to tell, to add my fear to the ledger. When I finally found my way back to the village, the ribbon on the branch was new, and a child's whistle I had seen in the clearing sat on the innkeeper's counter, perfectly whole. The villagers listened as I spoke, but their eyes were not hopeful. They had known such bargains before. They only asked one thing, that I never, ever rob the mountain of its quiet by naming the place where it fed. I did not promise. Because by then I understood the worst part. Once you begin to name the things that haunt, you give them a map. By the time dawn broke over the mountains, my body felt like it had been borrowed by someone else and returned damaged. I stumbled through the mist until I reached the village road, the familiar dirt path that had seemed so ordinary the day before. Now every stone carried weight, every shadow might still hide hooves. But the silence told me I wasn't free, I was marred. At the inn, the villagers avoided my eyes. One old man crossed himself, another muttered about the chosen, they wouldn't explain what they meant. Only the woman who'd told me about the inside-out jacket dared approach. She set down a cup of bitter tea and whispered, "It saw you. That means it remembers you. Tikbalang don't let go. They follow." I wanted to believe her wrong. But in the nights that followed, I heard the rhythm again, hooves on stone. Slow, deliberate, circling the walls of wherever I slept. The sound was never close enough to reveal itself, just near enough to remind me the pact was alive. I left the mountains, but they didn't leave me. In crowded cities I heard the clip of hooves against pavement, even when no horses walked there. My reflection in glass windows sometimes stretched too tall, my shadow bending backward at angles that didn't match my body. And more than once when I closed my eyes, I felt that hand again, long fingers wrapping my wrist, gentle but immovable. The creature had chosen me as its witness. My life became a retelling, a constant urge to describe what happened that night. But here's the thing, every time I tell it, the details shift. Sometimes the clearing is larger, sometimes smaller. Sometimes the mirror doesn't break, sometimes it never existed. I don't know if this is my memory collapsing under fear, or if the Tikbalang itself is rewriting my story as I speak. Because in the end, that's the true terror. Not that it hunts you, but that it edits you. You become part of its myth, whether you resist or not. The mountains claim their due. And as I share this with you now, I realize something unsettling. The Tikbalang told me that stories give meaning to the night, that to speak of it is to feed it. Which means every word you've just heard isn't just my survival. It's an offering. So if, tonight, you hear hooves pacing outside your window, don't open the curtain, don't try to see. Just remember, the moment you notice it, the moment you name it, you've already stepped onto its trail, and the trail never ends. If this story gripped you, do me a favor, leave a comment telling me what you think of the Tikbalang, drop a like if you want more, and subscribe so you don't miss the next encounter. And if you're curious for more full stories of mythical creatures, check out my YouTube channel at Twinkling17, that's where the legends live on.